You're listening to an ASCI Lounge podcast.
This is Talking Supply Chain, where we tackle the most important supply chain topics and trends with the industry's best and brightest. Welcome back to the ASCI Lounge. I'm Monique Fenech from Australasian Supply Chain Institute, and here we have a really great panel discussion. There are four gentlemen on the panel, along with our Queensland Chapter President, James Scotland, to address the topic collaborating across silos and cross-functional teams remotely during COVID-19 and the lockdowns. We are looking towards some of the main challenges of managing a remote team, the challenges of remote project work in particular, and techniques for maintaining productivity and progress. Here with us for this discussion, we have Stephen Davis, Program Manager for Orora Packaging Solutions, Alex Mehl, Tech Leader for Golding, Brett Findlay, CEO of FourPL, and Rob Chilinski, Senior Project Manager for FourPL. It's a great listen. It's long. It goes for about 40 minutes, but sit back, relax, or take yourself for a walk with this one, and hopefully we get some great tips for you to use for yourself and for your teams. Enjoy, and I'll now hand it over to James Scotland.
Over the last 4 years, we've seen end-to-end supply chain management become more important as digitalisation has started to impact our businesses and our industry. And I think we've seen it become not only a strategic advantage, but also a competitive advantage. It helps us to win in our markets, but also within our industry. And of course, with COVID arriving, it's become more of an issue. We've seen that not only do we need to keep moving forward on our supply chain management, but we also need to pick up some new skills in terms of our people management, some new knowledge, some new technical skills. So these type of webinars are good for us to get together over lunch. I hope you're having a nice lunch and have a great chat about what we've learned and where we're going. I think it's going to be a wonderful lunchtime chat, and it's good to have you all here. For those of you who don't know, the Australasian Supply Chain Institute is the leading voice in supply chain management. We are a body of professional certification. If anyone wants to know about that, they can head off to our website and find out about supply chain certification. Also, if you're a member, as the slide says, you really need to head off to the new ASCI website and update your details so that you can get more targeted information on what you're interested in terms of that big issue of end-to-end supply chain. The other thing that ASCI does, and I'm really proud of this, is that we are thought leaders in where we're going as end-to-end effective supply chain management. And today, we're going to have a great conversation about one of the key issues, which is how to manage our end-to-end supply chain in this period of non-contact connections. We're not in physical touch with each other, but we still need to manage extended supply chains. And for that, I'd like to introduce you to our silver corporate member, Brett Findlay. Brett's been in the ICT industry for 25 years. He started when he was 5. And I'll hand over to Brett to explain the panel, and then I'll take back the reins, Brett, and we'll ask some questions and have a chat. Have you unmuted, Brett?
I have unmuted, thank you. I just pressed the wrong button there. Thanks, James, for the kind introduction. And look, I'm not sure if my age is quite representative with this black screen. I'm looking like I've had a very good haircut. But look, firstly, I'd like to say not only yourself, thank you to you for facilitating, but also on behalf of FourPL. As an ASCI member, we're very proud and very excited to be hosting today's webinar. I am the CEO of FourPL, and for those that don't know FourPL, we're a local Australian company with offices in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne. We provide supply chain system advisory, implementation support and operational services to our customers. We have specialist system expertise in spend management, logistics execution and supply chain visibility domains, and our focus is about recognising where technology can add and gain value for all of our clients. We're proud to be partners or a partner of many local and global software market leaders, particularly in the domains where we're experts. In terms of today, look, we're really, our business particularly through the pandemic has really forced us to collaborate in new and unique ways with our teams, our customers and our partners remotely. It's been incredibly challenging, as I'm sure it has been for all of you. But at the same time, it's actually forced us as a business to change the way that we communicate, the way we deliver and the way we engage. This is already proving to be good for our business and most importantly for our customers. And I'm really excited about certainly our speakers, but also the tone and what you take away from these discussions. And I guess on that note, I'd like to also say thanks to our clients and our partners and our friends for joining today's webinar. We did extend an invite to a number of those, but thank you and certainly hope you enjoy the discussion. And what I'd like to now do is introduce our esteemed panelists. And I'll start off with an introduction with Stephen Davis. And Stephen Davis is a program manager for Orora Packaging. He has a lot to say and lots of experience. So look forward to that chat. And Alex Mehl, he is a technology leader with Golding. And again, he will bring the sense of calm that I think we need for this, for today, and some very, very practical experience. So again, looking forward to hearing from Alex. And then finally, Rob Chilinski, who is one of our senior program managers. He will also contribute in terms of the way we deliver for our clients specifically. And then we, FourPL, will be sharing a very nice paper post today's session. So look forward to your collective input and update. On that note, James, I'd like to hand back to yourself and you can get proceedings underway. But once again, thanks for facilitating. I'll help if you need me to as we move through today's discussion.
Thank you, Brett, and a very good introduction to everyone, a nice summary. And I may call on you for assistance, no doubt. If the people listening in on this webinar have a question, there is that opportunity down the bottom to ask a question. Just click on the relevant box, type a question in, and we'll see if we can pick it up. If we don't pick it all up in the time available, let's try and answer them via an email or whatever to everyone at the end of the proceedings. So yeah, we'll try and catch as much as we can. But let's get underway. I think we really should try and address three main themes. We could have a lot, but over a lunchtime chat, let's see if we can address three themes. Firstly, what have we learned in this rapid last few months where things have just gone crazy and we've had to scramble? In that period, I'm sure we've learned a lot. Secondly, in this period that we're now settled into of non-contact interactions where we're not getting face-to-face with people, as we said, but we are doing it via new technology platforms. How do we manage that and what have we learned? And thirdly, what's it going to look like as this becomes that horrible new phase of the new norm? With those three themes, what have we learned? What's different about the different teams and what's future? A good place to start would probably be with, well, Alex, you're the technology lead for Golding, which means that you do a lot of project work. How has the current situation impacted project work? And what have you learned over the last few months?
Yeah, look, thank you. That's a great question. So a bit of context, Golding is a mining services and civil construction business, predominantly on the east coast of Australia, but part of a broader NRW group, which is more of a west coast oriented business, also in the same industry. We're just going through a major post-merger integration of BGC Contracting, which was purchased by a parent company at the end of the last year. And that project sees us take BGC Contracting and split it into east and west coasts and merge them into the respective Golding and NRW businesses. So a very significant project with a very large number of people and just general transitional arrangements to make them part of our organisation. So for us, from a project perspective, it's been a tale of two cities, if you like. We've got the projects that required people who are completely new to Golding, so people who we'd never worked with, people who hadn't had any experience internally and didn't really know our business. A lot of those projects had to be put on ice, they had to be held. And we had projects that required people who had already worked with Golding, already had some organisational knowledge, and already had relationships built internally. So regardless of whether these people were internal to the business or external through partners or contracting, the real difference for us was whether they had organisational knowledge. And this is one of the key inefficiencies of remote work, if you like. So it's knowing who to speak to and about what. It's having the confidence to reach out and, blind Teams call an executive in the business. It's really hard in a remote context for a program or project manager to help, to act as an intermediary, whereas normally if you're in an office environment, you might be able to go and grab a couple of people for 5 minutes and sort out a problem quite quickly in the meeting room. You really need people who've got the capacity to confidently reach out directly. We really take that for granted. I think we also take for granted the ability to walk past the office of particularly quite busy executives and just grab 5 minutes of their time when their calendar looks otherwise fully booked. If their meeting from 11 till 12 finishes 10 minutes early, you can see that. You can see that when you walk past their office, and you can poke your head in and say, have you got 5 minutes, and resolve something. So that's quite an interesting, unique challenge of remote work. From a procurement perspective, it's quite interesting because I think over the last few months, we've seen that our existing partners have definitely been at an advantage. We haven't been quite so keen to engage new people for this reason. It's that lack of organisational knowledge and the overhead that comes with that. So that provides a significant advantage for incumbent partners. The other thing is, for us being a mining services and civil, we have clients, and from a mining perspective, it's particularly important. So in terms of projects where we need to get access to those mining sites, the clients need to acknowledge that they want us to come to site. And that's particularly challenging in this COVID environment.
Yeah, I think the remote teams, not only working remotely, but also teams that are actually in remote locations must be challenging. Stephen Davis, have you got some thoughts on that? You would have been going through similar things the last few months.
Yeah, well, Orora Packaging sold off a big chunk of their Australian business a few months back. And over the last couple of months, all whilst under this lockdown and working from home, not only have we separated those systems both logically and physically, and the physical stuff is still going on. The sale went through. We're running a project to implement new systems at the same time. A couple of the members of the team that I'm working with right now didn't actually join us until after we went into lockdown. So they've actually never met their colleagues. The only time they talk is either on these type of WebExes, these video conferences, or in daily team calls. I guess we are, also the team is made up of Orora employees, fixed term contractors, partners, suppliers. We've got 6 or 7 different suppliers working with us as well. And you lose some of that interaction of sitting down, having a coffee, having a chat, the corridor discussion. And what we've had to do is actually introduce far more formal communication. So in my project team, we have twice daily calls. We have an early morning call and then an evening call, which seems like a lot. But as we've moved through and got into now our 5th month of working this way, those calls have become pretty efficient. Morning calls tend to be what people need to raise, what are they working on today? And then the evening calls have evolved into just a quick catch up, see how everyone's tracking, and once or twice a week, virtual drinks and quizzes and sharing a bit of information about family life and holidays in the past. I guess we tend to focus a little bit more on the things that we can't do right now. So there's been a lot of sharing of travel photographs and stories from that aspect. One thing that I found very interesting is that I now know a lot more about this team, having not working with them in the office than I did when we were working together. When we're working together, things are a lot more focused on what needs to be done, who you're working with, what some of the tasks. Whereas now we spend a little bit more time, as I say, every day, talking about each other, understanding, making sure everyone's okay. And and people are now quite happy to sit at 5:30 on a Friday afternoon having a chat, having a virtual drink, whereas before when we're in the office, the first thing you want to do at 5:30 is get out, go home to your family. Now maybe we spend 24/7 with our families, so it's a good excuse not to talk to them in the evenings. The other thing that has worked, I think we're pretty fortunate with the timing of this. If this had been 10 years ago, the quality of our internet connection, the quality of the video conferencing, the cameras and the computers wasn't there. We would have really struggled in this environment. So if there's a silver lining, it's that we're really proving that this technology does work. The thing that didn't really work is we've talked about virtual teams, we talked about WebEx's video conferencing in the past, but it really was more lip service. We'd never done that. So as this moved very rapidly in working in the office to working online, we had to actually start to prove what worked and what didn't work and start to really put some of this stuff into practice. And I think we've all discussed this before and all looked at this. The day of hopping on a plane, going to Brisbane for a 2-hour meeting or a 1-day meeting, we don't have to do a lot of that. And I think we'll see with the airlines and with that type of business tourism, it's going to drop. It'll change. We've proven that we don't need to be in the same office in the same environment.
Okay.
2 or 3 of my project team actually live more than 2 hours away from the office. In fact, one of them is up in Sydney, and he was going to move down to Melbourne for this project, but didn't need to. They're saving massive commute times, and they're prepared to put a lot more effort into the work life, into the working day rather, and we get a lot more out of them. I was asked a question recently about, how's efficiency suffered or
Stephen, we might come back to efficiency in a second.
Yeah, sure.
And
I know in my introduction, Brett says I'll talk a lot, and sorry, I will.
That's okay. You've raised a number of issues, and I don't want to lose them before we move on. So just to Brett and to Rob, Alex raised the issue of working dispersed. We don't get a chance to pop into someone's office and say, got a minute, I just want to ask you something. We don't have that opportunity. But at the same time, Stephen said that he's gotten to know his team better by using this type of platform to ask questions and to get to know each other by having a more formal structure. So there's this lessons of between formal and informal. Want to make some comments, Rob, and then maybe Brett?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm quite familiar with Stephen's techniques, and I think what he points out, where there's a mix of the informal, I think that's really important. What we've found is that our calendars very quickly fill up with formal meetings, and that in itself can create an anxiety, I think, amongst project team members and so forth. So to have an element of still connecting with your team and but not necessarily have it all about work is really important.
Okay. And Brett, as a senior executive.
Yeah, so I'll probably address the question from a 4PL perspective. We've actually tried a number of things really for the last few months. Everything from daily stand-ups, which Stephen certainly talked to in terms of his experience at Orora. Our team have said, look, we love the daily stand-ups, but there's too many of them. So can we actually mix it up a bit? So really what we've taken the time to poll our team and really flex our model. We've recognised that we need to increase the amount of communication we make and take based on certain business conditions and projects that are in flight. And it does get tiring, particularly when you're listening to my voice every day. And I'm sure that's a good reason why a lot of the team have actually said, can we dial things back a little bit? And then we've introduced some things that are more personal. So they start to share some of their experiences as Stephen described. I think one thing that we haven't been able to address, which was what Alex raised earlier, is that water cooler conversation. That's been really tough to try and replicate. You might make a phone call, but it's tough. Even being on video, we can insist on people being on video, but you just can't replicate that casual conversation.
Can I pick that point up and I'll throw it to everyone? it's sort of a question without notice. Is that because we can't replicate it because we're not used to it, or is it because, this platform doesn't really work for that? To me, it seems like the technology is getting good enough now that we may be able to replicate it. We just don't know how.
Yeah,
Maybe.
James, I think we're even improving in this. Whilst the technology is improving, it's still asynchronous. You talk, I talk, I can't hear you. So you're losing some of that, that interaction, and also you have to now consciously make a decision to speak to someone. If I want to speak to the CFO, I've got to give them a call, arrange some time. As Alex was saying, you missed that corridor conversation where you previously would have stopped for 5 minutes and discussed something that was going on.
I think there's a lot to be said for the subtleties of human interaction. And here we are, and you can see our images right now. We've got shoulder up, and you've got the heads, and very, very static sort of regimented positioning. If we're sitting face to face over a coffee in a room with one person or one to many, there's all sorts of body language and tones and moods and volumes even that come into play that help you just refine some of the things that are going on within the room at the time.
So what's the answer to that? Before we move on, have you got a sort of a thought about, is there an answer? I take the point about it asynchronous. So I think that's a good point.
Personally, I think the remote aspect is something that we can't avoid at the moment. There's still an element of informal that we can instigate even in a remote manner. If I think about some of my team, for instance, I'd like to, if there's something that I want to be able to draw out of a particular team member, I think a simple phone call direct to that person is probably something that's going to work quite effectively, as opposed to a screen full of shoulder and heads.
Alex, any comments?
Yeah,
there's always a dog on a webinar, by the way. Always.
I think you lack a bit of fidelity in the context. So you've got these traffic light systems from Teams or Link or Skype for Business that let you have a very rough approximation of whether someone's free or busy, or but we've all been in meetings where it's finished 10 minutes early, but because it's reading your calendar, it still puts you as busy in red, and therefore people don't think you're available. And I think that there are a lot of small but cumulatively wasted opportunities for contact or for decisions or for escalations.
Let's we could talk about it all day about how we're going to use it, but let's talk about the technology itself. Maybe back to Stephen, or we'll start with you, Alex. What do you think about the technology? Is it working for you? What's the challenges that you have to work around?
Yeah, I think technology's been obviously fundamental to this, and I think Stephen correctly called out, if you went back a few years, this would have been significantly more difficult. Golding started off in a pretty strong position. A few years ago, the decision was made to standardise the business so everybody has laptops. Now, that's not a very common sight in the business, particularly a big mining and civil business. There are a lot of desktop computers, particularly for administration staff, where the view was being traditionally, well, why would the receptionist need to work from home? So we went a different path and gave everybody a laptop and gave everyone, we had sufficient VPN licenses for the entire company to work remotely. And we sort of asked the question, well, why wouldn't the receptionist be able to work from home? We've all had those situations where we're waiting for the Foxtel guy to come and do something, and you've got to be home for 15 minutes, but they block out half a day for you to do it. It's just a horrendous waste to take that time off. Why not just work from home? The Foxtel guy will come in and do what he needs to do and carry on. There's a big productivity hit to not having that. So I think that's a big help, having everyone on laptops and VPN. We've got a few people who had poor home or no internet. For them, all of our work provided iPhones have unlimited 4G internet on them, so people can tether, and that's been a big help. And the performance of 4G's helped significantly there. again, if you went back a few years, the bandwidth available from just a 4G internet connection wouldn't have been sufficient or of sufficient stability, but it is now, and we're seeing that a lot of people are working purely tethered hotspot from their iPhone. Microsoft Teams, we had it, but it wasn't really very well taken up, but it's now moved to pretty much 100%. Everybody uses it. People use the video in particular, and I think that's a big cultural shift. I think getting people to turn on the video historically was, a lost cause. One of the things we found is the file server experience is still a problem. The old traditional documents on H drive or whatever you like. That's pretty poor experience from home. So we've had to move some documents into Teams channels. And I think this is also exposing an issue with a lot of documents being emailed around now to get around it. That's going to create a bit of a debt that has to be resolved at some point. You have to go back through your mailbox and find 6 months worth of attachments and save them back to the server when you get in the office. Security is an issue. It's much less secure having people working from home. People's Wi-Fi networks aren't necessarily as secure as the office, and that's a challenge. And particularly refreshing people's training on cybersecurity has been an issue for us. And I think calendars. We talked about blocking out time, but I think encouraging people to block out time and also to make ad hoc spaces available in their calendar when they are available for catch-up has also been helpful.
Yeah, thanks. So again, a number of good points, and I'd throw it open to the panel to maybe address some of those. One is cybersecurity, working remotely. Has that been a challenge for you, say, Brett and Stephen? The idea of managing calendars a lot more significantly. And the third one, which I'd be interested in particularly, is that the kids and families have been using video calls now as the norm. Do you think we'll see video calls as de rigueur for business from here on, or will we still go back to the 1960 voice call?
Yeah, I just touch on what Alex said. People are becoming more comfortable with the video on, more comfortable actually communicating through this mechanism. And as the kids adopt it, obviously that'll just become what they're used to, and there won't be that same barrier. We've had similar experiences with the internet connectivity. Some people have struggled. In my case, I know that if I'm on a phone call and I tend to walk around and use my hands, I've had to learn to sit still while I'm on a phone call, because when I move to my kitchen, I'm in a Telstra black spot. It's also a great excuse if you want to drop a call and not talk to someone. You just walk to the kitchen and the call drops out, and they blame it on technology.
Good tip.
Yeah, we also had a few people who didn't have laptops, so there was a big scramble back in March to find laptops, and you couldn't buy them. You couldn't buy them anywhere at the time. So we have some people working on really old technology. And I think, as Alex said, some people have very different experiences with their home internet. So we've also gone through and tried just about every single WebEx or every single video conferencing tool. And surprisingly, some people work better with one than the other from a technology point of view. Some can connect brilliantly to WebEx, but they can't get onto Teams, and vice versa. We also have a project team that is made up of people from 7 different companies, and our VPN is only linked to the company image, so they have to carry 2 laptops. So that's the other challenge with shared drives and collaboration tools. And lastly, James, on that point, I trained the dog to bark just to prove that whole thing about getting to know a little bit more about people and what we have to do.
The timing was excellent, Stephen. Brett, have you had any trouble with security?
Yeah, it probably one of the things that we as a company, we are a cloud services firm, so we implement and advise our clients. And we did a massive migration to SharePoint. I'm going to say 2 years ago, and so the debt that Alex referred to, it still exists, but it actually exists with local syncing, but it is an issue. We're doing our best to keep everything up to date, but thank goodness we migrated our business to SharePoint, which has helped us enormously, and also even sharing IP with our clients as well. you know, we can have a site that goes out and can be secure, where they're accessing our project folders, and that's been great. Probably the issue we had in security, we had to, you know, with lots of individual hacks there, we don't have a dedicated IT function. And so we made a change, and suddenly everybody's access to their systems just fell over, and you know, just with one minor token change. So it's encouraged us to be a bit clearer in terms of how we deploy IT systems changes, the overall impact, even communications. Let's just say that the directors of the business were stepping in as IT support, which they were happy with, but then also very unhappy with. But yeah, in terms of collaboration, SharePoint and security, I guess our takeaway and advice to our clients is it is a big issue. And I guess the key for us is how we managed it.
Okay. How about we move on just a little bit? I think that we picked up some good points about technology and also the initial part. Can I ask someone, maybe we can start with Stephen, perhaps, when it comes to managing teams within your organisation, without your organisation, outside your organisation, also with new people that have got issues, what lessons have we learned? What can we take away from this intense period of everyone's got problems at the moment, everyone's under pressure at home and at work, and yet we're trying to manage through a new platform of teams. What have we learned? What can you tell us? What can you share with us?
Yeah, one of the things, given that we're in a project team environment, so it is a formal project with a plan and milestones and targets, the fact that everybody is working remotely has actually made this project team more efficient. Okay. And it was a very good point raised by one of the team members a while back. If we'd had half of the people in the office, half working remotely, you would lose that common message. So we have to spend a bit more time, hence the daily scheduled meetings, twice daily scheduled meetings in my case, making sure that we communicate. But what we know is that everybody has heard exactly the same message. So that's the advantage. Because you're losing the corridor conversation, you have to formally do that communication, but then again, you know that the message is consistent and everybody has heard it. I think one of the things that will change as well is as we start to look at how do we get back to work, who goes back to work, there will be a case where some people, and I think Alex's point, some people don't want to go back to work. Some people don't need to go back to work, and they're going to request that there's more flexibility. And everyone's done this. We've asked everyone to go and work from home, set up their own home offices, and they've done it. So why not allow that to continue?
Stephen, there's been a lot of talk about the hard part initially was having kids at home. But once the kids have gone back to school, I can work quite effectively from home. Do you think that's a fair point?
Yeah, my kids aren't at home, so I just have to worry about the dogs. So, but it is, and we can see that that as you've gone through, we have at least daily conference calls, and you pointed it out, James. The dog barks, the kids walk in, partner walks past the screen. But on the other hand, we've had people who've been able to go away on holiday. Those that can travel, those that are on lockdown like us, and go off and still work. So the rest of the family is out there in the snow. They're on a conference call, and then they can work different hours, be far more flexible. So I think that has been a big plus as well.
So I might throw to Rob, because you manage project teams as well, don't you, Rob?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it really depends on the nature of what you're managing and who you're managing. I think at the top of the conversation, we talked about sort of internal and external teams, and if you're managing an accounts payable team, for instance, I mean especially if that's a team that existed BC, before COVID, the team know what they needed to do. It's for the most part quite transactional, so their ability to work at home, less supervised is perhaps more viable, more feasible than a project team, for instance. where you have, as what Stephen's described, a collection of multiple parties coming together that haven't met before. That presents a few more challenges. In our game, in terms of consulting, we will do quite a broad range of engagement types, and so 4PL will do system implementations right through to advisory work, and I think you'd find that different types of engagements, and in fact different phases within a particular project or engagement, are impacted differently by having to work remotely.
Well, one of the first things you do as a project manager is establish the culture of the team, the way the team's going to work. So I'll ask all of you, is that different in this environment?
Far more challenging. You know, I think I refer back to something I think Alex mentioned as well. When you onboard somebody, there's a massive disadvantage if they've never worked with you before. They don't know the hierarchy. One of the things we've done on that point as well is that in the evening sessions, and try and do this once a week, you get a special guest. So invite someone in on that casual basis to talk about just general stuff, and that's the way you can get the CFO, the CIO, or somebody else in to build that relationship. But it's the culture is more difficult. I mean, everyone is just hanging out for the time when we can go down to the pub and have a drink together. So you lose that type of thing. It's far more difficult. It becomes far more rigid and less free flowing. But yeah. on the flip side of that, you've got people who can run outside and go and kick the cows off their property halfway through a meeting because they can do it.
Thanks for that reference there, Steve.
I think, Brett, have you got any thoughts on this? You've got to manage some diverse teams.
Yeah, I actually was going to ask actually Alex if he had a view, and then I'll come back and pick it up from Alex, if that's okay. Yeah.
All right, I wasn't sure if I was muted there. Look, no, I think Stephen's right. There's a bunch of things there that are critical for us. That sense of purpose. It depends if it's a project team or a business as usual team, but I think having clarity about mission and vision or that sort of purpose is really fundamental to making decisions in the absence of sort of more frequent contact with your manager as well. So if you've got that North Star, you've got that guiding sense of what are we doing this for, your why. I think that's quite fundamental to effectiveness in the absence of sort of more hands-on management.
And Alex, how do you handle the performance management and that regular feedback and the people management when you're remote?
Yeah, Stephen, it's a lot more challenging. I think one of them is being very clear on expectations. The task assignment process is very important to me. So it's really about making sure when you're assigning people work that they know the context and purpose of the task. They know what quality and quantity objectives you want them to meet. They understand what resources are available to them and the timeline expectations. So I think if you assign people tasks with those, together, you work with them together on those attributes, then it's much easier for people to know what's expected of them, and it's much easier then to manage them against those attributes.
Further to that point, Alex, what I've found during the last few months is that it's become more about output rather than hours, and I'm not sure if you've seen the same, but we're not necessarily scheduled to catching the particular train. Arriving at 8:35, you have your coffee and you get stuck into it, and then you've got to leave at 5:15 to catch the 5:25 and so forth. But it's more about being able to set yourself a target, a goal, an output, and sometimes the hours flex quite a bit and a person is still able to achieve that particular outcome with the right management support.
You're right, Rob. And I think I've always had a pretty good view of my teams to work remotely. It's something I've, enjoyed myself for probably the last 10 plus years, so it's quite normal to me. But I think one of the fears people have is that somehow people will be less productive remotely. And my response to that has always been, well, people are perfectly capable of wasting time at their desk in an office as well. So I don't really know, where they think the vast difference is between those two. It's not like you're walking around observing everyone's screen minute by minute. So I think the same capacity to not deliver is there as well. What's a big difference is in getting that task assignment and making sure that you have a good estimate about how much time is reasonable for that, but also setting stretch goals. So if people do complete something, that they know what they can move on to next, rather than saying, I finished a 5-day, task in 2 days and now I'm going to do nothing for 3 days.
Do you find
Alex, it is incredible, isn't it? How if you trust people, they end up doing the right thing. They repay that trust very, very quickly. And you give them the flexibility, you gain from that flexibility.
Absolutely.
I do hear a lot, though, that people say, I've worked remotely for 10 years, so I'm with you. I'm 15 years. It's comfortable for me. But I do hear other people over coffee say, working from home, I feel like I'm disengaged. I'm disconnected with my work colleagues. My boss doesn't know what I'm doing. How do you manage that micromanagement versus giving them the freedom to achieve?
Maybe I'll take the first part of the question, and I'll just circle back to one of the earlier comments around culture. I think, James, I think for all of us, it's one of the, I was having this conversation actually with a client yesterday. I think I would be, we've been in operation now for over 9 years and we've got a good culture. Our job is, as particularly of leaders of the business, is to continue to reinforce that culture. But if this is an opportunity to disconnect from the culture, this is what's going to happen. It's difficult to manage, I guess, onboarding new staff members and then getting them to participate in the way that we do things. And whilst we've got the best handbooks and the best onboarding process, and nothing replaces that face-to-face. Really where the culture and why we do things and how we serve our clients, a lot of that comes from that face-to-face interaction. So that's difficult in these times. In terms of task management, I really like what Alex said about setting tasks and then also putting stretch targets in there and extending, which gives people an opportunity to extend it. But yeah, in terms of things even like productivity and trust, which comes back to Stephen's earlier comment, I think in this, because we provide the flexibility and the trust, we're getting much more out of our teams. They're feeling much more innovative. They're using their own initiative to make decisions on behalf of projects and on clients, and we wouldn't typically get that in a normal business operating model, and that's just because it's they can, and they're informed, they're clear about what they need to do, they've been onboarded appropriately into a project and a client, and they've picked up on the rhythm of the way it should be run. So there were multiple points in there, but I think I was just also looking at the Q&A that was appearing on the board as some feedback there. So,
General George S. Patton said the best way is to tell people what you're trying to achieve and then get the hell out of the way and let them surprise you with their innovation. It sounds like you agree with that, Brett and Alex.
Very much so.
Absolutely, yes.
Have you had troubles with? Have you come across any situation where you've had to really bring people back into the fold, where they've got lost because of COVID or because they've got uninspired working from home?
Yeah, Alex, maybe I'll take the first one. This is actually just probably more of a test. If people start dropping off the daily cadence calls, their customers become more of a priority. They're not necessarily engaging with their team. That to me highlights a problem, and we need to get on top of that. And we try to do that. is there an issue at home that we need to help with? We've noticed that you haven't participated. Yes, you're still generating what you committed to do. But yeah, it's very much a sensory thing, and it's a participation thing, from our side. And we closely monitor that as a management team, and then we jump on it in a positive way, not in a negative way, to say, is there a disconnect? Is it the way we're communicating? But maybe to Alex.
Yeah, I agree with that, Brett. And I think, look, I think I like to zoom out a little. I like to focus less on what people are doing minute by minute, hour by hour, even day by day, and look at what they've done through the week. So, if you started the week with a set of objectives, and how did you go at the end of the week? How much of that did you get done? Did you feel like you needed a bit more? Did you feel like you had too much? And I tend to worry a little bit less about what people are doing through the week, because I think there's an ebb and flow that you need to allow people some flexibility there. You may see them offline for 3 hours, during the day, but they might pop on again at night for whatever reason. It doesn't really matter, because you're really looking at the tasks you've assigned them and how well they're delivering on those. So I prefer to give people that flexibility at an hourly, daily basis and look for weekly delivery.
Absolutely agree. And this goes to that earlier point about the trust and communication being two ways. People repay that trust. Yeah. The other thing I've found is that I'm in the last month in particular spending a lot more one-on-one time. So as we've moved into 5 months of working like this, and particularly in Melbourne, less so with the guys that are outside of Melbourne, going back into lockdown, people have struggled a lot more. We've got a couple of team members who are single, live on their own. And so when they're in this lockdown, they're not seeing other people. And that definitely has become a bigger issue in the last few weeks.
Yeah, I agree. I think for the first time, I guess some of the one-on-ones, particularly in the last 2 to 3 weeks for us here in Melbourne, has been, I guess we're seeing anxiety amongst the team that we haven't seen before. And whilst it might have existed, it's not until this stage of the lockdown that people have actually felt more comfortable in talking about it as well. But up until in the previous lockdown, anxiety wasn't necessarily a topic of discussion, but it's become one. And people are, whether it be in Victoria wearing masks and seeing everybody walking around wearing masks, it's magnified, I guess, the current working arrangements and the challenges for that.
There's a greater sense of uncertainty and the unknown. When we had the first lockdown, the timeline didn't seem as distant as what it might seem like now, and we're hearing about a lot more about the economy and lockdown till Christmas and that sort of thing. So there's a whole lot of factors that are sort of coming into play around that anxiety. Even the mobility of the community is something that we took for granted just 6 months ago, and we certainly don't have that privilege, at least for the foreseeable future. I'm hearing about sort of flights going back to sort of pre-COVID times by about 2024. When we start hearing that sort of thing in the media, it's pretty daunting.
Queensland's always been known as paradise. In the last few months, we've kept New South Welshmen and Victorians out, and so now it actually is truly paradise. Let's. I
think I'm moving to the kitchen now, James. I may drop.
let's move. Let's think about the future a little bit, and as I said, ASCI tries to be thought leaders. Let me be a little controversial and say, let's assume that a vaccination, that nothing's going to solve COVID until we get a vaccination, and a vaccination is minimum 12 months away. But then as supply chain people, we know that once we have the vaccination, we've got to find all the natural resources, we have to make it all, and we have to do this globally. So let's say that's 2 years away. So that's 3 years before we have vaccination out. There's another year to get people vaccinated, and then another year to wind through all of the leftover bits. So we're talking 6 years minimum of COVID, for argument's sake. How do we manage our businesses and our projects and our suppliers like this over the next 6 years? And one of the questions that's been asked is, as a start, how does that change the KPIs for the next coming years? So who wants to pick up that really quite small question?
Well, I think, I mean, if I can take part of that, I think this is going to be a real test of the times and a test of an organisation's culture, perhaps, but more so the resilience and the adaptability. If it is such a long-term prospect, and by all accounts it does sound that way, it's the adaptability of an organisation to innovate quickly is going to be the real test, I think.
The other thing is going to be where the workforce comes from, because you find more and more people not interested in doing this, and they'll change what they do and how they do it. And on that as well, when that freedom does come back in, everyone has got this pent up desire to go away, to take some time off. They don't really care that they're not taking a holiday right now because we can't leave the house anyway. And then you're going to see this sudden outflow of the workforce, and we're going to have to work out how do we become the place, and again, going back to that employer of choice, how does that become a reality and not just another buzzword?
It's a good
be able to go away and still work, using that remote technology you were talking about before. Will they be able to work on holidays, Stephen?
Will they be able to work on holidays? Now that's a good question. Will they be able to? Will they want to? Right now they want to, because it works. But once you've been doing this for 6 months, 9 months, 12, God forbid 6 years, it's the last thing you'll want to do is see Brett's face on a video conference call while you're on holiday.
Nice, Lam. Alex, I cut you off.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was just going to say that I'm actually seeing evidence that people who have spent the last 6 months working from home are actually deciding that it might be time to find a new job. And it's not what you intuitively expect. You'd think people would err on the side of caution and safety and say, well, I've got an employer and I don't really want to change. But actually, I'm seeing a little bit of the opposite. I'm seeing a few people saying, all this time doing this job at home, it's not the job that I thought I was doing, or not the job that I want to keep doing, and I'm going to have it for another one.
Does that mean we're not handling this right? Does it mean that as managers we're not doing this correctly? Rob, I'll cut you off, but is that where this conversation is going, that we still have a lot to learn? Rob?
I just wanted to ask Alex whether he thought that was an entirely new role or a new employer as such.
Hard to tell, Rob. I think I think it could be a mix of both. You'd expect that there would still be the need to work autonomously from home for the time being, regardless of the employer. But perhaps the nature of the work was lacking in inspiration, let's say, and perhaps they were looking for something different that they could continue to do from home. Or maybe they just got sick of seeing their colleagues' exact same faces on the screen for the last months and thought, change is as good as a holiday. Can't go on a holiday, so better change.
What do you think, Brett?
Yeah, look, I think that I think we need to recognise the strength of our industry here and the people in the industry, quite frankly. The things that we do every day is all about change. I'm sure none of us come to work every day expecting to just work to rule. I think and I think if anything, that the pandemic has actually encouraged everybody, both professionally and personally, to really reevaluate. And I think a lot of organisations, us included, have pivoted that way, and our industry will do the same. If I think about some of our clients, Today, once upon a time for us in terms of our transport management systems, we'd be talking about route optimization to our clients. We'd be talking about rating and billing. And today it's all about the customer. So everything that we do is centered back to the customer and how we get it to the customer, how we provide visibility to the customer. So it's changed. It's already changed our business, and it's going to change how we and what we support in terms of the industry going forward. So, yeah, I think whilst if you look ahead and you say, for the next 6 years, this is what it's going to be like, I think we will adapt. And I think that as an industry, we've always adapted, to be quite frank. So, for us as a company, we're genuinely excited about it, uncomfortable, but excited about it, because we know that we can support that change and be successful, and we always have been. And it's not the other thing, and a really important point that I want to acknowledge. As much as you talk about the Queensland, New South Wales, Victorian thing, and you make light of it, we genuinely know you care about what is happening to us here in Victoria, and that collegiate way that we're operating actually helps us to get through. And whilst the premiers might be, promoting themselves in different ways, actually it's all about supporting one another, and just like today's call is about supporting one another, and that helps with that change process.
Brett, I did a podcast a little while ago that said that we really are actually seeing Australian mateship at work. They are working together as a collective. We're doing things ourselves to look after the collective. It really is 200 years of Australian mateship coming to the fore.
Yep.
With that in mind, it's time to wrap up. It's been a great conversation. We've covered way more than we expected to, I think. I think the lessons are that we're doing okay, but we've got to work harder at managing the future. It's going to be fast moving. There are some more webinars coming up for the ASCI one. I don't have them in front of me. Monique, have you got them? Oh, there we are. The next one is on the 5th of August, planning your way out of COVID and the recession, with a wonderful bunch of speakers again, being handled by Brendan, who's the New South Wales President. And I suggest you have a look at the ASCI website to see the details. But for now, gentlemen, Alex, Rob, Brett, Peter, I thank you for your thoughts and your engagement, and I wish you the best in the future. Good on you.
Thank you very much,
Thanks,
James.
James. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Subscribe to our podcast today. For more information about our supply chain community, visit asci.org.au.